Mad cow disease. The best treatment options. Bovine spongiform encephalopathy is a neurological degenerative disease that is found in cattle and bison. When in direct reference to the various animal species that can be affected with this disease, including goats, sheep, deer, moose, elk and antelope. In deer and elk, this disease is known as chronic wasting disease. It is a disease that has no cure and is incredibly hard to detect until, that is, the incubation period of this disease has passed, in which it is too late to save the animal. BSE, also known as mad cow disease due to the symptoms expressed by a cow that has such a terrible disease, is caused by prions, not bacteria nor viruses. Prions are misfolded proteins that are far tinier than the tiniest virus, and is able to travel through the cow's system, through the blood-brain barrier, without upsetting any of the leukocytes, T cells or other cells associated with immune response, failing to cause or induce an inflammatory response. Thus these prions are able to travel through the blood and lymph system to the brain and spinal column, where they stay to incubate for 8 to 10 years. During this incubation period, the cow or bull does not show any symptoms or indication that they have contracted BSE. But after the incubation period has passed, the symptoms begin to present themselves. Diagnosing BSE in cattle is one thing, avoiding it is another. Mad cow disease in humans is actually not known as mad cow, but actually as variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease like in cattle and other ruminants. Prion diseases impair brain function and memory in humans. This includes personality changes, a decline in intellectual function, and neurological problems that worsen over time. Infections are rare, resulting in infection of approximately 1 in 1 million people. Once infected, there is no cure and death may occur within months of disease onset. This is no different for cattle, and luckily for the bovine that gets diagnosed with the disease, instead of having to suffer for months, they get euthanized as soon as possible to avoid further pain and suffering. That is why steps must be taken to prevent one or more of your herd from contracting this fatal, untreatable disease. The steps below are primarily meant for cattle. A separate article on avoiding the human variant of MCD can be viewed in the Neurological Disorders category. Steps. Know the federal government regulations on feeds for livestock. In Canada, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency has a mandatory ban in place where it is illegal to feed ruminants most proteins and animal by-products derived from mammals, especially those that are allowed to be fed to poultry, pigs, horses, and other non-ruminant livestock. This includes poultry litter, which is not prohibited as feed in the United States. In the United States, the Department of Agriculture's Food and Drug Administration allows for the feeding of chicken litter because it felt it could not find any evidence that it would pose any risk of BSE to ruminants when processed properly through deep stacking or ensiling. This is not agreed upon by other countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and those in the European Union simply because no amount of heat treatment will destroy and potentially existing prions. Know the signs and symptoms of BSE. Diagnosing this neurological disease can be a challenge if you are new to the raising livestock venture, so if you know what to look for as a means to prepare for the unexpected in your flock or herd, you can be ready to expect the unexpected. This is highly recommended if you have a breeding herd or flock of cattle, sheep or goats of animals that reach 8 to 10 years of age and older. Avoid purchasing feeds with animal byproducts. With exception to feeds for hogs, poultry, horses and fish, all feeds that are made for ruminant animals should be free of animal byproducts. However, you should make sure to check the label just in case, particularly if it's a brand you have not purchased before and are not familiar with. Feed manufacturers are usually really good about producing a sound, reliable product for your animals. However, mishaps and errors can occur, so if You notice anything about the feed you are buying that seems out of the ordinary, talk to your local feed store supplier about your concerns. An exception should be made with young animals that cannot be on full feed or fed the same feed as adult ruminants are, such as grain, hay, and silage. Milk replacer and colostrum powder formulas are made with powdered milk from cows, and are much better for young calves than soy milk replacer due to the lower fiber content. Milk replacer nor milk itself is not a significant risk for calves to pick up prions, simply because prions tend to favor nervous tissue, not milk alveoli in the mammary glands, which is why it is still safe to feed to baby calves. You should know which bag of feed is for which farm animal species simply by seeing the picture, coloring and label of the bag. Some people think it's okay to feed to cows that are meant for pigs or chickens, but this is entirely illegal and not a very wise decision. Thus, always make sure the feed you're buying is only for the livestock it's meant to be fed to, no exceptions. For farms with mixed livestock, ensure feeding areas are separate. If you have more than one species of livestock that includes a non-ruminant species or two, make sure you are feeding your chickens and/or pigs away from where you feed your cattle. This also applies to goats and sheep as well if you have either one, both or instead of cattle. This should be areas where your ruminant animals cannot get in and have their share of the chicken or pig feed too. Fencing off each species so they have their own feeding area, and developing feeding schedules so that one species that tends to be more nosy and pushy than the other gets to be fed first are highly recommended strategies. Check fences regularly, and keep an eye on the critters that like to escape or get themselves into where your other stock eat, especially at feeding time. Keep ruminant feed separate. As in the above step, if you are one that has more than one livestock species on your farm or acreage, just like with feeding, keep feed bags for your ruminant species separate from those of your non-ruminant ones. This reduces cross-contamination risks and mistakes of feeding a bag meant for one species to another. Though this step isn't all that crucial, it's still worth doing just to be on the safe side. There's no need to have ruminant feeds a certain distance or an entire room separate from non-ruminant feeds, but it would make sense to store them in separate containers or that you can easily distinguish one feed container from another. Keep these stored and locked up in a designated feed shed. Not only do containers help keep feed separate, it also reduces the chance of mice or rats getting in and eating their way into the feed, like what is most likely to happen if you have a wood feed bin to store your bagged feeds in. It also reduces the chance of one of your goats or cattle breaking into the feed shed and finding some tasty chicken feed to gorge on. You may also wish to choose to use a separate scoop for each feed to avoid cross-contamination. Keep your veterinarian on speed dial in case anything happens. Even though your federal government is doing their part to keep your animals safe from this incurable fatal disease, things can happen. If you have an animal that you suspect may have come down with symptoms similar to BSE or mad cow, contact your veterinarian immediately. Sell off your animals. If you are really leery about having your animals coming into contact with BSE, then you may have to consider selling them off. This is the most extreme solution to avoiding BSE or TSE in your herd, though probably not the best solution if you are not keen on doing this step and still wish to raise cattle, sheep or goats regardless the risk. Tips. Prions are not spread by any other means other than feed, nor are they contagious. Feed is always the culprit where animals can get prions from other animals if animal byproducts of very finely ground up animal parts are included. Besides humans, ruminants are the only animals that can get TSE. Pigs, chickens, horses and other non-ruminant animals cannot get this disease. Pseudoruminants such as llamas and alpacas may be susceptible to this disease, however no reported cases have been made. If you have any questions about this disease, please seek your veterinarian. They are much more qualified and informed about diseases such as TSE or BSE and are there to answer your questions if you have any. Though you may wish to avoid buying bagged feeds altogether, consider that you may be compromising the health of your animals for a risk that has a slim chance of occurring. Some of your animals may not do as well on fodder alone as you might want to think, so if you need to feed them supplemental feed, then do so for their own health. You may also consider purchasing feed wholesale from another farmer. If you find a farmer that is selling bulk grain, this may be an opportunity worth taking. Note that the grain you purchase may not be processed but as whole grains, so you may have to process the grains yourself to make it more suitable to feed your animals. For instance, whole corn is not as digestible as cracked corn because of the hard, outer shell.